Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of the Sunday Night Sitdown, where we take the time to talk to political leaders and politicians about things that matter to them. For this edition, we have a very special guest, the brilliant and incomparable Representative Summer Lee, who's representing the Braddock area, is here today to talk about, some legislation, some changes that's been going on within the Commonwealth and things that bring her joy. So welcome to the Sunday Night Sit Down, Representative Summer Lee. Hello, hello. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. Look, the answer is never going to be good. Since February of 2020. But it's good. I'm doing all right. How about you?
We are making it. We are here. We're very excited to have you on the show. You've been very busy traveling, across Pennsylvania, back and forth to Harrisburg, to create some legislation, to make some changes. So what has the past few weeks been like for you as we trying to deal with possible reopening, getting the rest of this CARES Act funding and COVID relief? What are some of the things that's been going on in the world of Summer Lee?
You know what? I'm just like a rank and file legislator. So honestly, even with all of that going on, I found out kind of about the reopening schedule like everybody else. I found out kind of with everybody else. It's crazy because things just go on. Like we're still voting on regular stuff. We're still kind of like moving legislation and pretending that the biggest priority isn't this and isn't like the unemployment claims that we're dealing with, isn't the fact that the eviction moratorium is expiring. We're still going to Harrisburg and we've still been going to session every week and voting on bridge namers and voting on, other ridiculous things. So it's kind of been an odd juxtaposition of kind of the real world of serving like our actual constituents who are still going through things, still struggling. And then kind of this other alternate reality of dealing kind of like with the Harrisburg politicians as they're kind of like pretending that things are kind of normal.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the eviction moratorium. What are some of the things that you think that this CARES funding is going to do in regards to making sure people are not super displaced?
So the PA rescue plan. So that's the thing, right? We need these federal dollars, and as these federal dollars are coming down, there's kind of this huge race to allocate them and to figure out where we're going. But what we know that we need are still the same things that we've needed from day one when the first CARES Act was passed and when we first started getting stimulus checks. We need to get dollars into people's hands. With the eviction moratorium ending, we have the possibility to see, and just in our region in Pittsburgh, right, where we already have an unaffordability problem, where we already have gentrification, or we already have overdevelopment. We have the potential of seeing hundreds or thousands of people who are displaced. And sometimes that can be anywhere between, people who are now unhoused, people who are houseless, to people who are transient, right? Who are now couch surfing or staying with family or whatever it is that they can to survive. We need to make sure that dollars are going straight to folks so that they can kind of handle the businesses that they need. We're still getting folks, and I know other legislators, they're hearing from landlords, they're hearing from developers who are saying, well, we haven't been able to pay our bills. We haven't been able to do maintenance on this house, right? And you rarely hear from the people who, like, for instance, the 300,000 people who are stuck in limbo with unemployment checks, who, aside from even getting money from CARES Act or the PA Rescue Plan, these are folks who didn't get the things that they paid into already, right? So they're kind of taking double losses. Those are folks who for 8 months, 9 months, we have people who haven't gotten any sort of income coming in. and they are now facing eviction. So I think that is going to be a really big problem. And again, I think that our priorities have been clear from the beginning. Where dollars need to go to small businesses, Black-owned businesses, which have been hit the hardest, which are kind of the last to get dollars, even when, we were struggling in kind of getting the PPP loans and all those things, right? We were seeing big chain businesses get it, but we weren't seeing the moms and pops folks getting in Homewood, or the folks in the Mon Valley getting those dollars. It's just the will to get it to the right folks.
Yeah, so you're talking a lot about the disparities that's been highlighted with the lack of like funding and support opportunities. Do you see Harrisburg taking this on right now? There's still, hope springs eternal, but do we see, because the economics always seems to like allow some type of bipartisanship efforts. So do you think that because we're now in a situation where we're talking about economics, that this can be pushed, or is it still like, no?
You know what, Miracle, I'm not jaded on a lot of things. People are like, oh, you're going to get into politics and you're going to immediately get jaded. I'm not jaded on a lot of things, right? Because there are a lot of things that I expected. Economic, you're right, kind of fiscal responsibility, things of that nature, not wanting to raise taxes so that we can, still kind of maintain our social safety nets and things of that nature, that you could sometimes get bipartisan support on that. I can't explain, it's hard to explain the impediments that we're dealing with in Harrisburg as it comes to getting resources down to everyday people throughout this pandemic. And it's honestly been incredibly just obscene almost, The Republicans on one hand have been pushing, the reopener bills. They've been saying, oh, we just need to reopen, without any sort of restrictions. The answer to this is not to get people dollars. It's not, a UBI. It's not more dollars in a stimulus check. It's not loans going to small businesses. The answer for them was, we just need to open it. This is not a real problem. The real problem is government overreach. And then kind of on the other end, we've got, a really disempowered Democratic Party that, lightweight fighting, will say, well, we need, paid time off. We need hazard pay, we need things of that nature. And the reality is that this is just they're not fighting in good faith. So yeah, on one hand, I do want to hope that there's going to be a political willpower to step in, but we're a year into this. We're over a year into this now. And we still haven't seen a political will from people who, wield the levers of power, right? To actually do the things that they can do. It's not that we couldn't fix the unemployment system. It's a complicated system and no one wants to take responsibility for it. It's not that we couldn't pay, past hazard pay and pay time off and pay sick leave. It's that we haven't had the political will to do it. It's not that we can't raise the minimum wage so that people aren't being paid starvation wages anymore, so that folks are getting back to jobs where they're not just being abused and have no health insurance and are expected to work for pennies, right? It's just that we won't do it. And I don't see that changing. I like to hope that I'm going to be proven wrong. I like to hope that with the federal dollars coming in, that, cooler heads will prevail and people will step up and our leaders will kind of step up and make sure that these funds are being distributed responsibly. I like to hope that. I'm hoping with you. That's a really harsh way to put it, right? But yeah, I want to be honest, right? From my perspective, because the reality is that my perspective is not vastly different than other people's. As I'm not, I'm not in the leadership rank. I'm not the governor. I'm kind of just the loudmouth who, screams about disparities and disproportionality, right? So they're not always inviting me into those rooms. So my perspective is very much kind of like y'all's, in that sense. So that's why I want to be just honest about it, because even as we're getting these dollars, even as, federal dollars and state dollars are coming into it to fill budget gaps and things of that nature, we have a huge deficit that we have to deal with. And we already know in our community that we're usually the last to touch those things, even as they're dealing with schools that are, falling apart and businesses, we already know that Black and brown and poor communities are going to be last if we're not able to steer that early and real hard.
Yeah, and so I know you said you're like rank and file, but you have been doing a lot of good work, and you had like recently, you put together a hearing on bail and bond within Pennsylvania. So can you talk about some of the work that you are doing that brings impacted people to these tables of power?
Definitely. I mean, even as we're, working through the pandemic, it's still important that to remember that we had issues that we were dealing with before, and that work still goes on. So as we're talking about decarcerating Pennsylvania, we have been continuing on. We started when I first got here. We were doing work and moving legislation and creating a narrative about dignity for incarcerated women and femmes and trans folks who are usually, when we're talking about incarceration, oftentimes we're not talking about that population of folks. We've been advancing that, right? As we're talking about ending cash bail, that has been a conversation that folks have been having in movement communities and abolition work, recognizing it as one kind of step towards abolition. So it's a conversation that's been ongoing. So we wanted to take the opportunity to create kind of a bill and use it as a vehicle to kind of drive that conversation. But I will say that it's been a really interesting process. Our philosophy is that, when we're creating, whether we're creating bills or we're disseminating information, we always want to co-govern. So that policy hearing that we did on that particular bill on cash bail was really in conjunction with the Abolitionist Law Center and ACLU and different bail funds, folks working in those arenas, really contributing kind of their perspectives and their insights into this process, and really bringing up kind of different points, like maybe that our cash bail system in Pennsylvania is not actually the problem. The problem is we need to start looking at MDJs, and we need to start looking at other pre-trial detainers. So it's really kind of shifted and really taken us in a different direction. So we're still working on that. We've been, of course, having to revisit and still consistently pushing back on this police violence stuff. I don't know how much time we have, but we literally just voted out of committee and judiciary on a bill that would create a felony if a police dog, a canine unit, is killed in a commission of a crime, right? And the inspiration for this was a police dog that, responding to a crime, fell down an elevator shaft, and they want to give people additional charges. Well, we're talking about police dogs, and we still can't get a bill through Pennsylvania that makes it illegal for police officers to shoot unarmed kids in the back. So we're still working on that, of course, and that's ongoing, right? Getting those bills introduced and really trying to move Republicans to actually bring some of them up.
Yeah, because I remember we had meant to have some of them come through. I know a couple of them passed, but what's going on with that package of criminal justice reform bills?
So yeah, going back to kind of that action, I think 3 of those bills passed, as we talked about. It was like the database, a weakened form of the database, but a database no less. That would allow kind of a red flag to be pulled up when a police officer is transferring. The no consent in custody, so that police officers can no longer rape victims and create victims out of folks who they have in custody, which is a no-brainer. Is wow that we didn't already have that, and that we had to take the rostrum to get that one. And a trauma bill for police officers, right? If you deploy your weapons within a year, you need to be checked for PTSD and you need to be screened. And if you have symptoms that if you exhibit sort of dangerous symptoms, you can't be out with a gun. So those 3 passed, and we haven't had any movement since then. Like I said, we're back to moving bills that protect police officers, that over-criminalize people. And, the Republicans are back to completely ignoring the entire movement, completely ignoring and abdicating our responsibility to move on that. He did say that, the only reason why we didn't move these bills earlier is because no one asked. That's what he said. He said no one asked them to move bills on police violence. So we're asking. And we are coming back. We're rewriting our qualified immunity bill right now. We're refortifying our use of force bill. so that it goes even deeper, right? Because you didn't answer the first one. So we're going to keep asking for all the things we want, and we're going to reintroduce them, and we're going to re-ask again, like we have to every session. So that's where that is. I don't expect that without outside push. I don't expect without like real movement from people on the outside that he's going to move on that. But we did get those 3 last time. So we'll keep working.
And you're talking about criminal justice issues. You've also been very much on the forefront of gender disparity issues and like working with legislation around maternal health and mortality, being on some of these like events. And so outside of pushing in the Harrisburg legislature, have you seen like a conscious raising of like issues about things that impact the lives of like Black and brown people in Pennsylvania?
I definitely have, right? And I think that's again a perspective that I have from being a Black woman in these spaces. I have been hearing, of course, more about the maternal mortality rate, more about maternal health, seeing that even elevated in Harrisburg, seeing that starting to get elevated in Congress, because it's a conversation that people on the ground have been advancing, because people, even we're talking about our gender equity report in Pittsburgh, right? We're seeing that conversation advancing. We're seeing people in both the medical profession and in government recognizing that it's something that we need to do something about. So, that's one instance where I've definitely seen movement. I've even been seeing, and hearing and learning more about, the needs for doulas and making sure that we can get that covered, that women and laboring folks and people who are carrying children can get that covered by their insurance, right? So we're seeing kind of a conscious effort of folks to kind of start to learn about that and start to understand that issue. I think that even as we're starting to talk about kind of economic disparities, I think that we have in movement spaces, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's just the decarceration movement, I think that we've been seeing a lot more of the conversation being centered around Black and brown women and femmes. And again, our government's always going to be slow to move on that because our government still doesn't reflect that. Leadership still doesn't reflect that. But the pressure to start to diversify, as people will say, or make these spaces culturally representative, we're seeing it. It's slow. We're hearing it. But I definitely see that movement way more on the outside than you do on the inside.
Yeah, and going back to economics, you were talking earlier about the disparities and Black communities getting the dollars last. And we also saw that be replicated with like the vaccines and like the lack of like resources. And so have you seen anything changed within like the Mon Valley area when it comes to vaccine access, and what resources are available and what resources are still needed?
Definitely. That has been one of, I will say, the more infuriating conversations that we've been having just throughout the pandemic, right? When we first recognized and kind of got data back in, seeing how Black and brown communities were being hit harder by COVID, how these pre-existing inequities were kind of leading to the disparity in outcomes, right? Whether it's more severe cases or deaths. And we got that information and we realized it early on, right? But all these government folks were saying, well, coming to us, well, what can you do about it? What can we do about it? And we're telling them. And then, health equity boards are forming, not just in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and other Black cities. The Black Equity Consortium, where Black medical professionals and public health professionals are coming together to try to guide this conversation, but getting pushback, always getting pushback. I will say that now with the vaccination, I've been seeing it from doctors, doctors who have been able to kind of pinpoint and kind of determine where they want to go, as we've been moving from like the bigger clinics where, they were having like the mass vaccination clinics, the ones at Three Rivers, Three Rivers, right? I'm tired. What they call that place now? Hinesfield. The one at Hinesfield or PPGP Paints Arena. Those, whatever them fields are called, those ones. You were seeing like the big mass clinics. And what we were seeing early on in a lot of Black neighborhoods, we were seeing this big effort to make sure that we were getting vaccinations the prevailing knowledge was go to the people, go to where they are. So we were seeing these vaccination clinics open up in Black and brown communities, but we were also seeing rich white people traveling to get those doses. In Philadelphia, you were seeing them coming from Chester County and Montgomery County. In Pittsburgh, you're seeing them coming from the affluent suburbs, from the South Hills and the North Hills, coming into to Black areas to avail themselves of it. So what we've been doing now is that, doctors and AHN and UPMC and all of them, right? They've been able to do smaller clinics where you don't need appointments, where you can just walk in. I will say that they are kind of starting to experiment. J&J is back online. So the benefit of the J&J is that it's a one-shot dose. So you only have to get it once. So if you're going to go to, say, the church parking lot and do it, if you're going to go to the Mon Valley, which we have a couple of those planned in the Mon Valley, we've been able to kind of partner. I'm not allowed to say partner with, but we've been helping to make sure that we're getting them in your Braddocks and your Homesteads and your Hazelwoods, right? The benefit of the one shot is that we don't have to worry about them coming back for a second appointment, because that's been a problem too. If we're going to have people come once, then they have to come back a month later, or else those didn't matter. So they've been working out the kinks in that system. They've been very intentional about trying to get into Black communities. But they obviously have to pick that one up. We have to continue. We have to make sure that, I think sometimes they get a little discouraged when they plan one and they don't get, 1,000 registrations. So the key is to continue to go back. The key is to continue to go back to counteract kind of misinformation that's coming down. And I know you've seen it. We all see how this information is targeted. The vaccination can give you herpes. The vaccination will kill you. The vaccination, will cause all these side effects. So it's been a constant effort that the government, with the medical professions, with your politicians and your community leaders have been having to do to make sure that the Black community is not left behind in the vaccination rate.
Thank you so much for that. I know we're going to be joined by Ryan as well, who's going to be wants to ask some questions. But you're talking about the misinformation that's been going on with the vaccines, and that was a huge issue at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, particularly within the Black community. So have you seen now that, unfortunately, COVID has ravaged a lot of our communities? Have you seen people now becoming more aware of what COVID-19 is and asking more questions and reaching out for more support and resources?
The reality is that we've been seeing that from the beginning. The problem with kind of the misinformation campaigns and hearing from people who have apprehension about whether it's vaccination or even just the veracity of COVID-19 or the severity of COVID-19 in the beginning is that oftentimes, especially in the realm of social media, a minority of voices are amplified. It's a platform where folks who have some of the biggest concerns or the biggest misgivings about it, or their concerns are amplified because we are in uncharted territories. I mean, none of us have lived through a pandemic before. We're all going through this. Nobody's fault. It's no one's fault that we have a pandemic, but we've had to adapt and we've had to adjust. And the reality is, especially with the Black community and other marginalized communities, is that a lot of the misgivings that we have, a lot of the apprehension that a lot of Black folks have is because of the past. And that's very real. And having to counteract that has been very real. But the reality is that from the beginning, Black people have been looking for information. They've been looking for and seeking good information. They've been wanting more access from the very beginning. Even when people were saying, "Oh, the Black community is maybe not taking this as seriously," we were hearing from the Black community who were wondering why they couldn't get testing in their communities. How are they going to get testing if, and solving those problems? How are we going to get testing if it's only a drive-through and you have to have a car, but we might not have as high access to cars as white neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are more affluent, right? Those were always concerns that the Black community had. And they were always reaching out to solutions. And yes, now we are seeing more and more people who, as they get their vaccination, they're telling their family members that it's okay. Telling their family members, listen, I got it. I had the side effects, but I feel safer now. And I can now go back to my family. I can see my grandkids. And we're seeing more and more people inquire about how they can get it. And also in the early days of the vaccination, the problem was with our elders, the internet, the digital divide, the technology divide, getting the folks who are most vulnerable access to the vaccination by an online sign up was almost an impossible feat, because these are the people who are most vulnerable, right? The people who don't have access to computers, who don't know how to use them, those issues. So yes, absolutely. The Black community has been demanding resources, and narrative that say that that's not true are not entirely true either. I'll just say that.
Listen, go off, say what you need to say. That's all we have. The show, and we're gonna bring in Ryan now to ask some questions and to join the conversation. But I also wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit, because it's election season, as I like to call it.
Election season.
Unfortunately, that is true, and I don't think we realize that. But I feel like now all of the election seasons are now just blurring together. So like we're already talking about 2022. But you've been very involved in getting people registered, letting them know what's going on with the elections and the ballot measures. Why is it so important to you as someone who has really fought tooth and nail in 2 election cycles to make sure that everyone is able to vote if they choose to do so?
I love that question, because I think there are so many different reasons why, and some of them are more fitting in different environments. The reality is that there is this saying, right, that representation is not going to save you. Well, that's true. But the reality also is that when we are not represented, when we're not there, when we're not controlling the levers of power, we can't rely on them to save us. They've not done it. They never will. And that's also true. So I think that the important thing about electoral activism, electoral organizing, is that is organizing the community with a specific goal, right? It's re-empowering communities, because that's what political power is, right? We loan it to people. We loan it to somebody who represents us. They are not kings for a reason. They don't serve into perpetuity for a reason. We actually have the power to take that back at any moment. But the problem with that has been that our communities, particularly Black and brown communities, queer communities, disabled communities, have rarely had access to proper information, right? We've really had the organizing capacity, whether it's money or access or connections, to really actually start to make those changes. So what we've been seeing for the longest time, right, when we finally do get one person, and we're taking one person and we're putting them in the ocean, and we're expecting them to be able to make a wave, right? That one drop of water in the ocean to make a wave. And it's easy to get discouraged when that doesn't happen. What I always tell people is I'm one of 203 people. If you were 203 of the 203, what would you do with that power? How would you change your life? How would you change your community? How would you direct resources? What would you do with the incarceration system? What would you do with police if you had that, right? And then we work backwards from there. So I always work with elections, because there is power, not just in sending a politician. There's power in being able to control those fates. I think there's power in the organizing behind the electoral. It doesn't stand by itself. It can't just be we vote and then we go back. But like you said, Miracle, we feel like now it's always an election cycle. That's because we've changed the paradigm from we only do this every 4 years to we're doing this every 6 months. And that's tedious, but it's what starts to get people awakened to different ways that they can shift the narratives and shift the resources in their communities.
Ryan?
Yeah, thank you for that, Summer, and thank you for joining us today. Sorry I was a little bit behind doing some other things for One Hood Power, but but yeah, I just wanted to ask you real quick. So your Unite PAC has endorsed candidates, running for several different positions in these upcoming elections. but has, seemingly been especially focused on organizing around the Court of Common Pleas seats that are open and the slate of 8 candidates you've endorsed for that. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit on why you feel those seats are so especially important in this election cycle, and why you've put so much focus into that.
You know what? These judicial races they're the ones that go kind of most ignored, kind of, because it's counterintuitive. It doesn't feel like they should be elected positions, because it's a profession, right? Because, it's a really distinct kind of subject area that doesn't seem like you should be electing them. Sometimes it feels like us regular people don't always have everything we need to make a determination about who can be a judge, who can be an MDJ. What does the Court of Common Pleas do? What does the Commonwealth Court do? What does the Appellate Court, the Superior Court do, right? That's a real specialized thing, and it can be really overwhelming. So I think the importance is twofold, right? We have a big opportunity with the Court of Common Pleas, 9 seats open. That's 9 different opportunities that we have to replace somebody else who probably was a carceral judge, probably was for, detainers, probably was sending or sentencing Black and brown people more harshly, because we know that everywhere across these United States of America, Black and brown people are sentenced more harshly, as compared to like their white counterparts. Those are opportunities to actually impact the day-to-day lives of people. So this is one of those rare opportunities where people understand it, right? It was the same thing with the DA race. When we were talking about like Black and brown community, they knew the DA. They knew the DA because too many of us have interacted with the court system, right? We've interacted with the legal system. So empowering people to actually move those seats and take them back and get people in there who are going to and understand racial justice, right? Who are going to prioritize fairness, who are going to prioritize justice. Those are big opportunities to actually change Allegheny County right now, to change these communities right now, because mass incarceration, outside of all these other things with government, this feels very tangible. So that's why we're really, really, really focused on that. Just on the sheer opportunity of it, but also because of that gap in knowledge, right? People feeling overwhelmed by 30, 40, 50 people running. Really just trying to help to guide folks so that they're not going into polling places as overwhelmed as they would have. It's like the coalition that came together for the slate of 8 didn't exist, to guide folks on, well, who are the people who are justice minded? Who are the people who have been in the streets for racial justice and gender justice?
Thank you for that, because I know it's a lot, and I feel like sometimes people look to you as kind of like the beacon of like for all things like progressive in Southwest PA, and so I bring that up because I wanted to talk about a specific interaction you had on social media with some people who were asking you to kind of like leave the Democratic Party and join kind of like third party. No. To join like third party delegations, and I'm wondering how do you balance like that pressure, because people want you to like be all things to like all people, but at the same time you have to represent the people that elected you and represent and make sure that there are positions of power and seats at the table that you would possibly lose if you gave up your Democratic party affiliation. So I'm just wondering, like, how are you balancing those calls, and how are you trying to make sure that you still keep the support of like progressives and leftists who are maybe like more into liberation and abolition than some mainstream Democrats?
Yeah, that's been the biggest balance that I've had. I can say that the way that I navigate that is to always start from truth, like start from a place of truth and start from a place of purpose. My purpose before anything else, right? And I don't want to say this as to say that I don't represent my 60,000, right? Because that is what I do. But my driving force is racial justice. My driving force is liberation for Black and brown and other marginalized people. And that's the thing that I always keep in my mind when I'm getting tugged in various places. The reality is that we have a 2-party duopoly right now. I don't believe that anybody should have fealty to a party. And I struggle with that with my Democratic colleagues who don't like that I am not pro-Democrat enough. Sometimes they feel like I come for the Democrats too much and I should focus on the Republicans, right? And the reality is that until we have campaign finance reform, until we have multiple parties where we are all being represented, until we have all those, we're not going to get to the liberation that we really need, because we know that salvation is not in the Democratic Party. Salvation is not in the Republican Party. Salvation is not in the Green Party. Salvation is not in any of these parties. Salvation is in us. Liberation is with us, and the power to do that is within us. So yeah, there's that. I start with that. That particular conversation was so interesting, right? Because again, I was honest. At the end of the day, if I could not be a Democrat, I wouldn't be one. It is not because, I'm trying to shade them, but it's the reality of the situation is that Black and brown people, but Black people, I'm talking about Black people right now. If we were not always fighting for our most basic rights to not be killed by police, to not be over incarcerated, to not be evicted, to not have to fight the education system for a basic education, for a quality education. If we didn't have to fight for that, we would be as diverse as any other voting electorate. If we would have the freedom to get into our secondary and our tertiary needs. And the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, can be who they are, right? They don't even have to pretend to want us. They don't have to court us at all. And the Democratic Party, knowing that we have nowhere else to go, don't have to roll out the red carpet for us, like they roll out the red carpet for white middle-aged, mid-class, mid-American people, voters. And that needs to change. And until that changes, we're gonna have a problem. So in that sense, I am fighting for the day where none of us have to have fealty to that party, to any party. But the reality is that me as a Black woman coming from a Black community, a poor Black community where my poor Black family still lives, I don't have time, and we don't have time for moral victories, because we have to do harm reduction. Because Black people, whether we're Black legislators or Black organizers or Black lawyers or Black whatever we are, we have to do harm reduction in every place we are in until we dismantle systems. And that means that maybe harm reduction is making sure that a white man who's going to vote for mandatory minimums isn't in that seat anymore. Maybe the harm reduction is making sure that somebody who is against reproductive rights isn't there. Somebody who is against trans folks isn't there. And until the third parties build up and organize so that they can meet the needs of Black people, and more than just rhetoric, and this is not coming for anybody either, and more than just rhetoric, having a great platform is great, but until we can get those seats to implement it and to protect it, you can't ask Black and brown people to divest from a system that's killing us. You can't ask Black and brown people to always be the guinea pig, always be the one to sit out while white people kind of war over their ideology over these parties. So that's how I approach that. And that's real, and that's just the real for me.
Yeah.
I don't know why, Miracle, that was going to trigger me.
No, I was trying to ask, people be like, y'all don't ask the politicians the hard questions.
No,
so I was just trying to, ask, because I don't think people understand that, when you're in a party system, your access and your assignments to committees follow what that party system is. So divesting and going third party means you're no longer at those tables at all. I think that wanting more people to be in third parties and run in third parties, Green parties, working families parties, all those parties we have coming up are really great. But I think only people understood why you were saying, look, this is not feasible or practical or logical for the community right there.
And to be clear, because that's right, it's not feasible today. But what we do is we work to make it feasible tomorrow. I think that our goal is to every day be dismantling, right? Every day, do something to dismantle these systems and these institutions. And the next thing is to do something every day to build up the equitable systems that we're going to need to replace it with. So even while, maybe Greens or maybe Working Families Party are not strong enough right now, and not just them, right? New African Independence Party, whatever the party may be, our job is to how can we help them to build that power, and expanding the electorate is the answer, right? Electoral organizing, getting more people involved, plugging more people in. That's the answer to building those parties. But also, you're right. And I had to ask somebody. I was like, we had a Green candidate, and I think one of his promises was, I'm going to hire a lawyer to work in my office, to work for free for the people. That's not even legal. You can't do that. Like, we can't have legal services out of our state rep offices. So that's not something we can do. Or how would you even pay for the office, right? Because the caucus controls your pay. So if we have staff, the caucus pays our staff. If we have an office, the caucus pays for our office. And if you don't have a caucus, if you're not with the Democrats or the Republicans, who's giving you that money to even have your office? So those are things that we need to think about too, as we are organizing outside of the two-party system.
Yeah, and I'm glad you actually brought up, people saying you're not pro-Democrat enough. That's actually a nice segue into my next question, which ties back into the upcoming elections as well. But so historically, endorsements from the Allegheny County Democratic Committee have been really influential on these type of elections. Especially for positions like Court of Common Pleas judge, other judicial seats, where people, really aren't familiar with the candidates for the most part, other than, seeing who was endorsed by the Allegheny County Committee. But we've talked to a few guests on the Power Hour recently who've talked about how, the influence of those specific endorsements has really been declining, in the past few election cycles. And we're seeing more the rise of the influence of endorsements from other organizations and individuals, and just like a lot of grassroots organizing to get the word out about candidates. That's kind of really been able to mitigate, that controlling factor of seeking and receiving that specific endorsement. And so I just wanted to ask you for your take on that, especially as someone who is, a perfect example of that, who's, been able to run and successfully win a seat, multiple times now with that grassroots organizing and without that endorsement.
Yeah, I'm happy that you brought that up, because I think, again, as we're talking about kind of building up power outside of the party system, the Allegheny County Committee, Democratic Committee, is like one of the most kind of like poignant examples of an opportunity to do that. Here we have, if we have ever heard about it, like the Oil Boys Club, that kind of incestuous club where you get in if you know people, and then you help each other and your family members, and we create this gate. We do this gatekeeping where the certain kind of class of people have access and regular people don't. That's absolutely what that is. But it's also, they breed their power and kind of our lack of knowledge, right? So I'm happy you brought up like these kind of races, the municipal years, where there might be 100 people on a ballot in any given municipality, 20, 30, 50 judge candidates, sheriffs and taxpayer and tax collectors and borough councils and county councils and city council and mayors and all these different races. And they know that regular people don't have access to information, right? Regular people aren't dumb. Regular people aren't worse voters or better voters. They have less access than the committee does because they control access. They control it. That's what their gatekeeping is, right? So their endorsement meant something because regular people couldn't access a slate card, couldn't access a candidate information sheet, right? Where Pennsylvania doesn't send that out, where every household with a registered voter gets like an information pamphlet with all of the elected officials on it who are running, what the position is, who's qualified, who's running, what are their platforms. Where is an everyday person going to get that information? The committee was supposed to do that. The committee was never supposed to just write the slate card and stand outside the polling places knowing that you are not going to have any idea who to vote for. That's how they take advantage of that. What they're supposed to do is they're supposed to organize in your block, organize your block, organize your ward. They were supposed to go in and knock and door knock, and they were supposed to give people information that they had access to. They're losing power because we've determined that we can do that ourselves. We realize that we know how to use the van like they do. We realize that we can start our own PACs where we're funding our candidates so that they don't have to rely on them anymore. We're realizing that we're qualified in our own ways, right? And we can send our representative now. So that's how we've been able to neutralize them. That's how we've been able to expand the electorate. But also because we are willing to expand the electorate, we don't just talk to super voters. We have organizations and movement orgs and political orgs that now go and talk to the non-voter. They talk to the infrequent voter. They talk to the disenfranchised voter. And those are people who like the traditional party system has ignored. And That's how they've been able to keep power, and that's how they've been able to keep us out of power. So that's why Unite and organizations like that are so important. That's why, One Hood Power, APA PAC, all these different organizations are so important, because we're filling the gap, not just in electoral, but in electoral. We're filling the gap where people have been kind of left behind and left out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I know that you talk about expanding the electorate. You've also, I think you said, quadrupled the representation of women politicians within Southwestern PA. And so what does it look like for you for the next 2 years, 4 years, to not only expand the electorate, but get more people involved in the political process as candidates?
Yeah, I think we did quadruple the women. There was one woman in the Allegheny County delegation before me and Sarah, and then Jeff Benham and Emily Kincaid came. One woman in the Allegheny County delegation is absurd, but that's another story. I think that the role, when I first started writing, I wasn't running. I didn't think I was going to ever run for office. What I really wanted to do was help other Black women run, help other marginalized people run. Because I always had this theory that the reason why people don't vote is because they don't feel like they have anyone to vote for. Everything is politics. And sometimes we kind of pretend that politics is a special branch, but politics is everything. It's your education system, it's your roads, it's your taxes, it's your house, it's your housing, it's your job, it's your medical care. It's all of those things, which means that we are all inherently political people, but we are not taught that our lived experiences, our expertise. And we're not shown that, because people like us don't often run for office. Regular people who talk like me, people who went to the public school with me, people who hung out on the corner with me, the folks who played ball with me at the basketball court. Those are never the people who go to represent us. So we feel like government isn't for us. We feel like politics is for a different group of people, and our job is to vote if we care to do so, and live our lives and kind of survive government. I think over the next 2 years, 4 years, I think the plan is to continue doing what we're doing, getting everyday people, whether they're poor folks, working class folks, union folks, Black and brown folks, queer folks, disabled folks, getting those people the resources that they need to run, letting them know that there's a space for them, that their expertise is real, and showing the community that we can change the system election by election, bit by bit by bit by bit. And I think that our experiment in Allegheny County these last 3 years have shown that that's true. When somebody like you is running, when somebody who speaks your language, or somebody who meets your needs and meets you where you are runs, more people vote. Even in the pandemic last year, in my primary, we had over 50% of the voting population come out and vote. That's a super high number for a primary. I think the county average is 34%, and the county average is usually way lower than that. So that just shows the power of showing people and giving them a roadmap and helping them to find themselves kind of in this big system and this big map, right? When you show people where they are in it, you empower them. So we need to start getting school board members. We need to start getting magistrates, right? Because magistrates, we all know what a magistrate does. We've all had the citation. We got to start getting magistrates, letting people know that a magistrate doesn't need to be a lawyer yet. That opens the door for people. So that's kind of the plan. It's worked for the last couple of years. That's the plan going into the next one. It's long work. It's organizing. It ain't no magic wand. There is no big bang here. It's not a big bang. It's just a continuous climb.
And now I'll have Ryan do the last question.
Yeah, thanks, Miracle. Yeah, so before we wrap, I did want to have the chance to ask you about real quick. It's been a few years in the making, and recently County Council, just passed the resolution to create that countywide citizen police review board. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that real quick on different aspects of that board, that you might be in favor of or have critiques on. And then also, because the way I believe it's set up is that it only really applies to the county police initially, and different municipalities can opt into that. So I was just wondering if you had heard anything about, potential intentions of some of the municipalities in your district to opt into that.
So yeah, first off, shout out to that. whether it does, despite it not doing everything we need, right? Because we don't even have to say whether, that it exists is the labor of Black folks in our community, elected and unelected, who have been working for years. They've been researching, they've been organizing, they've been fighting. And it's a testament, even this, right? Even every concession, and we have to look at it that way. Every single concession that we get, every single change movement we get, big or small, is a testament to the work that we put in and the power that we're building. So in that sense, congratulations to every single person who has something to do with that. We know that like these systems weren't built overnight. They're not, I always say this, they're not going to be dismantled overnight. We are not dismantling a 400-year-old system. We're not dismantling racism overnight. We're not dismantling policing overnight. And that's just the reality. But anything that can save a life, anything that can prevent the next Antoine, prevent the next George, prevent the next Brianna is a positive. And it's a mandate to keep going. It's a mandate to keep building, get bigger. So for that, that's great. I'm disappointed, not in them. I'm disappointed that it takes this much to get that little. It takes us really like taking the streets consistently for years. It takes rioting. It takes looting, all those things that they claim to not like. It takes legal action. It takes all of these things. It takes Black people being killed on camera for us to get these small concessions. That pisses me off. So there's that. The state, policing is really at the state level. Education and policing are two things that are delegated to the state, that the state refuses to move where we can actually hit almost all police, right? The state refuses to move is the problem, not the county. The county is doing what it can. The municipalities have bigger barriers than others. In my communities, there was going to be like a regionalization effort. It fell through because these little boroughs that we have, none of them want to give up their power, you know, and there's the power of being the police chief. They don't want to be the one to maybe lose folks. They don't want to be the one to lose money, to gain, to not have control of all the funding. So we're always going to have those things when it's left to the boroughs and the municipalities and the county to do it. The reality is that this has to happen at the city and the state level. And the only way that that's going to happen is by getting rid of these people who are apathetic, these people who don't understand our lived experiences. So that's what we have to do next. We have to take out these Republicans who are standing in our way. And we have to take out the Democrats who are standing in our way. And then we have to talk about the FOP, and we have to talk about arbitration and qualified immunity. That
sounds like a plan. And so the last question I like to ask everyone, so it is like, what is bringing you joy? You talked a lot about a lot of stuff. I triggered you just a little by accident. But like, what is some of the things that are bringing you joy, that are keeping you like encouraged and motivated during these like unprecedented times?
Ooh, it's hard. Listen, believe it or not, your politician is going through it too. Not just me, all of us. We're all living through a pandemic. So we're all kind of going through the lulls and the pains and the community grieving and all of that. What brings me joy? This is going to sound real just mundane. Y'all, I be watching my stories. I don't want any judgment. I come home every day and at 8 o'clock, I Hulu my General Hospital and it is heating up. So I do watch that. I got to catch up on Pose last night. So I just watch TV, I guess. No, the real thing that gives me joy is kind of sadistic. It is this movement. Like, organizing is draining and activism is draining, and it can be toxic sometimes because we're dealing in our triggers. But seeing young people and seeing old people and seeing everybody in between coming together and really starting to like walk into their power and taking it back and starting to wield it, even when we don't wield it in responsible ways all the time, right? Because we're learning, it's a weapon and we're learning how to wield it. Even as we're learning how to wield it, like, that gives me so much joy. It gives me so much hope. And it reminds me that I'm here just holding space and waiting for the next generation to come. I'm waiting for new people to come. I'm like holding the fort until like these new folks come and we really take on capitalism. And when this new generation comes in, because millennials on down are less likely to be capitalists. Millennials on down are more likely to believe in climate justice, understand environmental racism, believe in Medicare for all, want transportation, like a bike. You know, we're more likely to do all those things. So all I know is I know that some reinforcements are coming, and that gives me hope even in the pandemic.
Listen, I love the stories. I'm telling you, I've gotten into like K-dramas, and it is just like, it is life affirming. That and like Hallmark Channel, it's just like,
not the Hallmark Channel. No judgment. No, I'm not judging. I'm saying thank you for sharing that. I think that's
you watch the Hallmark? Listen, Countdown to Christmas actually runs during this. Don't judge me, Ryan. Countdown to Christmas also comes in July too. So if you miss any of the movies during Christmas time, you can also see them in July. Just to like,
it's little things. It's little things that spark joy. And you take your joy. Also, seeing other people in the things that spark joy for them sparks joy. When somebody's like, I really love Hallmark Channel, I'm like, you get that. You have that moment with this.
Yes.
Right. I'm not knocking y'all. Yeah.
It's the theme. Like, what other channel themes their movies and their TV shows? Is Sunny still is Sunny happy though? Because I stopped watching General Hospital. I feel like Jason, like when they killed Jason for the third time, and I was like, I'm tired.
No, you have to get caught up. I'm telling you. Listen, it's popping. It's lit this week. Lots of stuff is happening. The people of Port Charles think Sunny's dead. Sunny's not actually dead. Jason just got shot up. He's back.
Again.
Army's in the mob right now.
We gotta have a producer throw
it's really picking up.
We gotta have a producer throw a spoiler alert at the top of the show. We're giving away like all the recent episodes.
Ain't no spoiler alert. You're gonna get these.
Listen,
because I was like spoilers because it's popping. Take it.
So I was like, Jason dies again. Who was this fake twin? And that was like a few years ago. And I was like, I'm tired.
Spoiler alert: twin is dead. Jason's back. We're all is well in General Hospital.
Ryan, don't judge us. Listen, General Hospital as the world turns. What was it?
I'm trying to go through fake twins and all. I don't know.
What was the show? Okay, it wasn't like.
It's not supposed to make sense. It's not supposed to be logical.
Yeah, I'm not knocking it though.
What was the one soap opera where it was like, it wasn't like Charmed, but it was like witches and warlocks, and they were like also stealing people's babies. Do you remember that one? And oh my God, I will send it to you. It was so good. And it like, first of all, it turned out to be like, it started off as a normal drama, but then somehow people became witches, and it was like, what has happened?
Fantasy meets a soap opera.
And then they were like, you know what, we went too far, so we're just going to close the soap opera down.
It's Harry Potter and soap opera form.
We've done too much. But yes, I like the stories. You know, good for you. Hopefully, you know, Sunny will pop up. He's take Carly out.
He got amnesia right now.
Oh, of course. Of course.
You know, tropes.
He has amnesia, so now he gets to. This is how he gets to rebrand and be the good guy.
And he is. He's just like a humble bartender now.
Oh my God! I should watch it now. I'm gonna watch it. You sold me.
It's on Hulu.
You have sold me. Well, with that, thank you so much, Summer, for coming on to the Sunday Night Sit Down. We appreciate you very much, and look forward to all the things you're going to do in the future. You can feel free to leave the studio. I just have to do the plug for the week. So if you are tuning in for the first time, the One Hood Media Network, you know, we have a lot of programming. We try to bring you every single day so you can learn things like why you should watch General Hospital or how Hallmark is amazing. Personal plugs. But on tomorrow, on Monday, we're going to have our judicial candidate forum. We talked a little bit earlier about why it's so important for people to vote and get involved. We have judges, Supreme Court, Superior Court, and our appellate courts, they're running. And we get to vote for them. So we want to hear why they're running when we get to know them a little bit. So at 7 to 9 p.m. on Monday, we're going to have our judicial candidate forum. Tuesday, we saw a lot of you said, you know what, I see these ballot questions on my ballot, these referendums. I don't know what they are, what they mean. So we've joined with the Keystone Education Fund, and Tuesday at 2:00, we're going to have a community spotlight where we're going to discuss the ballot measures, what they mean, who's putting them up, and what a yes or no vote means. Wednesday, you know, there's always some type of white supremacy going on, no matter what we do. It happens. So we're going to bring you This Week in White Supremacy. On Thursday, we are very fortunate and blessed to have, Mama Brown and Julius Boatwright do On Tilt, the state of mental health amidst Black peacing in America. And we're going to be talking to some providers because May is Mental Health Month. So we hope that you tune in. We have so much programming coming, some very really cool segments and some couple of surprises we have in store for you this month and next. So please make sure you subscribe to our channels and you check back with us here every day as we'll have something new for you. And thank you again for joining us for this week's edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down.